that would regulate carbon dioxide emissions. Our next speaker is going to give us an update on the Clean Power Plan, or as some in North Dakota have called it, the Costly Power Plan, and some have used other letters for that C. Our next speaker going to do that is Dave Glatt. He's the Environmental Health Section Chief with the North Dakota Department of Health, and soon to be our Department of Environmental Quality. He'll give you a little brief update on that. Dave joined Health Department in 1983, way back then, as an environmental engineer. In 1989, he became manager of the Groundwater Protection Program. He was named Assistant Director for the Division of Water Quality shortly after that. In May of 2000, he became Director of the Division of Waste Management, and in 2002 was named Section Chief of the Environmental Health Section. He's a registered professional engineer, received a BS in biology and an MS degree in environmental engineering from North Dakota State. So please help me welcome Dave to our annual meeting. He's going to be talking about the Clean Power Plan and how things have maybe changed a little bit under the Trump administration. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning. As indicated, my name is Dave Glatt. I'm Section Chief for Environmental Programs for the state of North Dakota. To hear that I started in 1983, it really doesn't bother me too much until I have a staff meeting. And I mentioned one time that, this problem is almost as difficult as a Rubik's Cube. Half of the staff just stared at me. I didn't know what the hell a Rubik's Cube was. So I'm starting to feel old. Then I doubled down and I said, it's just like Jed Clampett. At some point, I just got to give it a rest. What I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about the Clean Power Plan, and first, some of a regulator's observations on what do I see as it relates to carbon management and what we see in the markets and kind of overall activities in moving in that direction. Talk a little bit about the repeal of the Clean Power Plan, some of the issues that we saw as being very detrimental to states' rights in our ability to really regulate and do what's right for North Dakota. And then we'll talk a little bit about what a new Clean Power Plan, if you will, should look like, and then some of the challenges moving forward. I'll do that all in 30 minutes. But first, I've been asked to give you a quick update on the Department of Environmental Quality. A day doesn't go by without somebody asking, where are you at on the Department of Environmental Quality? Give you a quick 5-minute. Last legislative session, the legislature thought it was appropriate that the environmental issues have a little more visibility. Instead of being part of the health department, they have their own agency, because environmental issues are front and center in a lot of things that we do on a day-to-day basis. So they voted that we break out, but that there's a transition period. They said that should happen, that whole process should happen by July 1st of 2019. Now you gotta understand me, I'm a kind of guy that oversimplifies things a lot. I said, great, we should have that done in a couple months. All I have to do is change the name, you sign a letter and tell EPA we're no longer Health Department, we're DEQ, same address, same people, doing the same job, no problem. Well, I got educated really quick. A lot of things have to happen. We have to change our rules, change the name and the rules, and they'll be coming out here pretty soon for public comment. We have to go back to the Administrative Rules Committee, say we changed our name. We have to work with the Environmental Protection Agency, looking at, make sure that that transition doesn't interrupt any of the programs we have moving forward. The EPA end of it, it's a little confusing. Some of the programs, all they need is a letter saying name's changed. Other programs have to go through the Federal Register. So long story short, by December 1st of this year, we're hopeful that the transition will occur. I will say that one of the things we did as part of this process is we did a stakeholder outreach. And I thank you that participated in the online assessment, providing input. Also, we did face-to-face interviews with a large number of people, those people that liked us, those people that hated us, to get a kind of a balance on what three questions we kind of asked is, what are we doing good? what could we do better and what aren't we doing that we should be doing. Kind of what came out of that was some issues from industry. Their concern was succession. When all us people who know how to define a Rubik's Cube and who know who Jed Clampett is leave, what's the next group going to be like? How can we trust them? And we heard that loud and clear. I will tell you, we have a lot of good staff, and we're looking for great things from them. But I don't think you really know who they are. And so we're going to take some time to start introducing them, getting them more involved in the day-to-day type operations so you can get a comfort level on where we're moving forward. Also, the issue of sustainability. We are tied to the federal government pretty heavily as it relates to funding. It ranges anywhere, depending on the year, 50% to 70% of our funding comes from the EPA. Budgets are really uncertain right now, and so it's really tough for us to do long-range planning. What we are planning to do, and for some of these, for some folks this is a four-letter word, is we're looking at how do we start reducing our dependency on federal money. One of the things we'll be looking at is permit fees. And I hope the reason we want to do that, we don't want to get in a position where our funds get cut so dramatically on the federal level. The state is looking at some tight budget times that we would be in a position that we have to give back programs. Hope we're not there. One way we can save some of those programs is looking how do we generate funds for permit fees, and we'll be looking at that. Not to be more than what other states are, but to maybe more like them. And then finally, a lot of things were talked about is communication. Internal communication could be better, and we found out external communication would be better. It's interesting, I had several legislators come up to me after it was passed, the law was passed, and they said, well, now you're going to get a building, and you're going to hire staff, and you're going to get into the environmental programs. I said, we've been doing it for 30 years. They were unaware of what we actually did, so we need to do a better job of doing that public outreach. So, long story short, December 1st, we'll be meeting with EPA. We may be modifying some of our, what we call the MOUs, which are kind of the primacy agreements. They were originally done back in the 1990s. They have to be made a little more contemporary. Don't get too nervous about that. We're not giving up primacy, but we're trying to make those agreements a little more effective as we move forward. So if you have any other questions on that, feel free to catch me in the hallways or give me a call. What I'm really here for is to talk about the Clean Power Plan. Which is a four-letter word with a lot of folks in this room. And it was what we kind of saw as a war on coal. And quite frankly, from my perspective, it was a war on states' rights. At what point are we able to go out and really do what's right for North Dakota? We're about environmental protection, but we need that latitude to be able to implement laws and rules that fit North Dakota's needs. One of the things that I've noticed, just kind of looking across the landscape, when we look at where are we at on carbon capture. If you look at carbon emissions in North Dakota, we're below 1995 levels today. Not a lot, but we're below 1995 levels. This is during the time period where we had growth in energy demand. So something must be going right. I think some of that's due to, obviously, a shift to renewables, better efficiencies with the plants. I think that's part of that. But we're seeing reductions. Coupled with that, when people, they say, well, you're a coal state, a fossil fuel state, I say, look at the big picture. Another thing is that we are getting into renewables. I think if you look at the statistics, we're probably, when we've had an increase of about 4%, a little less, 4% of energy demands since 2012. Wind has increased, generation from wind power has increased about 34%, 35%. Big increase. Also, when we look at wind and hydro, as a state, we're about 27% of the total energy being generated comes from renewable resources. So are we strictly a fossil fuel state? No. We're looking at all of the above in the big picture. When we look a little bit further, So what that tells me is that that carbon capture mentality, that carbon management mentality has become part of the business model of the generation group. They understand that the big picture is that they have to get in the game and they have to be part of this carbon capture and carbon management. A lot of this has been done not under the Clean Power Plan. I think you could argue it's under the shadow of the Clean Power Plan. But industry knows that this is the right thing to do, and they need to look at how do we do things more efficiently. Looking at the path forward, I was in Minnesota recently, and they were discussing, the Public Utilities Commissioner was discussing their carbon plan and the great things that they're doing. But they said by 2030, 22% of their energy would still come from coal. About 45% would come from nuclear and the rest from renewables. He said that works good till 2030, but after 2030 they're concerned. And the concern is that they're looking at decommissioning the nuclear plants. So where are they going to come up with 45% of that energy? They don't think they can make it all with renewables. Something has to fill that gap. So it's not all reduction. We need to be looking in the future as we move ahead. And I think we are. In North Dakota, when we look at, it was indicated that we are a leader. I think that's due to the fact that we're a small state, you know all the players, and you get together periodically and you talk. And you know the individuals, and it's not about agendas, it's about doing the right thing and using the science moving forward. We're pretty fortunate in that respect. Because we're small, we're also held accountable. That you can't hide behind the bureaucracy of it all. You have to be part of the game and you have to be part of the solution. Things such as carbon capture retrofit projects are being looked at. Minn Kota, I think up in Boundary Dam, they're doing some things. There have been some failures nationally, but if it's going to get done right and it's going to get done, I believe it's going to be here in North Dakota. We look at things such as carbon sequestration. We're one of the first states, if not the first state, to look at Class 6 wells for deep well injection. And also we're part of a memorandum of understanding with Saskatchewan, Montana, and Wyoming to look at information exchange. How do we use coal better? How do we burn coal, use it to generate electricity better? It's not sitting on our hands, it's looking forward. As industry, as research and academia, and also as the government. So I think carbon reduction or the carbon management is part of the business models as we move forward. The Clean Power Plan kind of, I don't know if it opened our eyes to it, it kind of pushed it along a little bit. That's all the good I can say about the Clean Power Plan. As it first came out, and if some of you remember, we got together and we talked about, where's this Clean Power Plan going to take us? And I will say, to the credit of the industry, they did not say, hell no. At that time, we were looking at about 20% reduction in carbon emissions, and I will say that all the major players said, we can meet that, but we need time. And we need to be looking at things such as stranded assets. And how do we move forward with this? And we need some certainty in this whole deal. But if we get that, we can make this happen. So there wasn't a whole lot of comment from the state because we thought we could be a big player in this and be part of the game. What changed was the final rule came out totally different from what we saw initially. They went from something like 20% to 40% reduction. What that meant is that a lot of the coal-fired power plants were looking at anywhere from 40 to 60%, sometimes a little bit greater, carbon reductions by 2030. And there were some timelines even shorter than that really said, this isn't workable. Comments by EPA, I will say that I got from some higher level folks said, well, yeah, it's tough, but they had to be winners and they had to be losers, you just lost. That didn't sit well. There should not be winners and losers. There should not be parts of the country where you just give up. We're in this together. So we started looking at that, and I would say we came unglued, probably. We said the timelines are too short, can't meet them. You didn't address things such as remaining useful life. You took away authority from the states for implementation. You set a standard of just over 1,300 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour that the technology at this point in time doesn't allow us to achieve. Normally, EPA sets a process, and it's up to states to come with that standard and implement it at the state level. They took that away from the states. One of the things that really irked me, maybe irked somebody else too, but is that when they gave blame for CO2 emissions, it's where that power plant was located. It's not where the energy was used. It's where the power plant was located. That's where you got that credit for that CO2. But when it came to wind energy, it's where it was being used. It's not where it was generated, and that's where the credit went to. I thought there was a disconnect there. If they're going to blame us on one end, they should give us some credit somewhere, and they didn't do that. So what we ended up doing is we challenged the law. We said, this just is, first of all, if we shut down every power plant in the state, you could not measure the CO2 difference in the atmosphere. So what are we changing? You're going to bankrupt the state, can't show the environmental benefits, not a good deal. So we decided to go to court, along with several other states, and we ended up, quite frankly, gaining some traction as we moved to the Supreme Court. We were granted the stay in February 2016, and the judicial system, they said, let's hold back on this while we take a look at other things and see how this plays out in other courts. And then fortunately, with the Trump administration, once they got into office, they started looking at things a little bit differently. Believe it or not, they're starting to listen to the states. I think you could argue that the shoe just went on the other foot. Those that were going to now feel that they were going to be in harm's way because of climate change and all the CO2 emissions, they felt they were being harmed, and now that the government was against them. I would say, it's a taste of medicine that maybe we had, and maybe you should have that now. Let's look at a more holistic approach rather than winners and losers. And then we still need to look at that moving forward. But we challenged the law, and it was stayed. What came up from the Trump administration is that they, through executive order, they said they needed to step back and take a look at those laws that would unduly harm or damage energy generation in the United States. Well, for a lot of us, that's kind of a no-brainer. That shouldn't take too long. And so they ended up looking at the Clean Power Plan, and they made a proposal that they gave a notice in October of 2017 that because of new interpretations that they felt the previous administration was too liberal in their interpretations of the law, took away states' rights, basically is mandating a grid change. Energy was being produced in different ways than in the past, and that was going to be mandated through a law, that they didn't think that was right. So then they went out and they proposed to repeal the law. Did a lot of listening sessions, and they will close comments on that in April of 26th of this year. Our comments as a state agency is that, we do believe that the EPA exceeded their authority. They went contrary to the cooperative federalism, where the states and the feds should be working together to get compliance. The states play a very crucial role in making sure that anything that is passed on the federal level gets implemented fairly, but acknowledges the unique circumstances that occur in the state. We also felt that EPA can set a process, but can't set the standard. At 13.5 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour, we felt that wasn't EPA's role. We also felt that going outside the fence line was contrary to the way EPA has done business in the past, and that we should be looking at site-specific, source-specific carbon controls, whether it's heat rate evaluations, which you do all the time because you want to be as efficient as you can be in generating electricity. But when we got into fuel switching, mandating technologies that just weren't ready for prime time, or mandating that we go to the renewables, we thought that was an overreach by the federal government. We also thought it was against cooperative federalism, which we abide by. We think that's states need to take a very active role in implementation of environmental regulations. The feds can't dictate word for word what the state should do. They can identify a potential end goal and a way to get there, but the states at the end of the day are the ones that really implement the programs. So we recommended repeal, get rid of it. We do also acknowledge that when I look at Minnesota and some other states, they're of a different mindset. Some of them think, you know, we approach it more a technology, the science, the legal authority of EPA. What I've seen of the other comments, they're more of impact due to climate change on their population, more intense storms. If you live along the seacoast, you're going to see sea level rises and those kind of impacts. I don't necessarily discount those things. We could debate climate change for hours and hours. I think we'd end up back at the same point. At the end of the day, is how are we going to control carbon emissions and still maintain a viable economy? And I've been criticized for saying that, well, the economic portion of it shouldn't be a part of my equation. I believe it should. When people don't have jobs, when they don't have electricity or electricity is too expensive, that has a direct impact on public health. And I can show the documentation, I can show studies that show that. So are we going to sacrifice our population for something that we can't measure in the atmosphere globally that probably won't make any change? No. But we didn't say hell no. We said we're willing to move forward within reason. At the same time, they also came out with an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. What should the new Clean Power Plan look like? And they're asking for input from states and industry, and a lot of people provided a lot of comment. Kind of an interesting note. If engineers provide the comment, it's to the point with a lot of numbers and units and those type of things. When attorneys provide, and it's about 5 to 10 pages. If attorneys provide comment, it's at least 50 pages. And when you read through it, it has a lot of citations, and I still don't know what the hell I read. Not that I'm getting against attorneys. They're a lot smarter than I am, but I just like those shorter documents. It cuts to the chase a little bit quicker. But when we looked at advanced notice, our statements or comments as a state was, first of all, do we need it? When you look at the market and where the market is going, and looking at a balanced approach to carbon capture, look at a balanced approach to renewables, making sure that the grid is reliable, do we really need this? And that was more a philosophical question than what we wanted them to do, because we also realize that if we leave that vacuum there, that's going to leave uncertainty. Uncertainty to the industry, uncertainty to environmental protection. And so we need something there, quite frankly, to deal with the pendulum. The pendulum is swung back and forth. And there's a concern when that pendulum comes back from another administration, it's going to come back with a vengeance. We need a placeholder there to at least slow that pendulum down to where we have certainty to our industries as we move forward. I think when we looked at our overall comments, what we were saying is that stay inside the fence line. Stay site-specific, source-specific. Don't leave that vacuum of uncertainty, but stay inside the fence line. Look at the remaining useful life. Stranded assets, that's a big deal. Look at grid reliability. As we change, 5 years from now is going to look a lot different than today. 10 years, a lot different. Trying to predict what technology will do for us is going to be tricky, but allow us that flexibility and time. And we encourage that they allow the states to have a more active role. Get back to that cooperative federalism where the states take the bull by the horns, if you will, do the evaluations, and do what's scientifically right and economically achievable. Those were our primary comments. As we move forward, we have new challenges. This is not going to go away. This is the new paradigm that we're dealing with at the industry level and at the government level. We have two sides of this story. Both sides are very stuck in their positions, very solid that what they're doing is the right thing. I do believe we need to sit down and talk. I do have a meeting between environmental agencies, us in Minnesota, coming up in the near future. These are one of the things we're going to talk about. Where are you at on Minnesota's side? Where are we at on North Dakota's side? Is there things that we can work out across the table that make sense? Minnesota needs energy and electricity. North Dakota has a great resource. Maybe we can work this out. It's market driven. This is where we're at. I believe the market's going to get us to a good place some point. Technology development, I like where North Dakota is going, looking at the potential options for retrofit. Other uses of lignite coal, I think we got some opportunities here. One of the things that really is concerning to us is there's a lot of talk about 111D, existing power plants and how to regulate carbon capture. No talk about 111B. I have a little concern there, and this is where I'll need the attorneys to write their 50-page opinion, is how will 111B impact retrofit designs? Is there something in there that could actually stop that from moving forward? I think we need to be a little more aware of 111B as we move forward. Other things is that there's other CO2 sources out here. And I have been meeting with oil and gas people, and you guys maybe will like this, maybe not. I mentioned that in the very near future, they will be looked at as part of the regional haze program. To the company, they looked at me and they said, we don't know what that is. They need to be part of the solution as well. When you look at CO2 levels coming from our power plants, it's going down. Overall, CO2 from the state is going up. That is from oil and gas production. They need to look at a better way of capturing their fugitive gases. I think they're working really hard on it. Flaring is probably not where we need to go. We need to do a better job of capturing those gases. It has to be a holistic plan for the state of North Dakota. It can't be just one industry bearing the brunt. It's got to be a spread across. And time and state's authority. It's not hell no. We can do this. And I think we can, I said this before and I believe it, I think we can be a model. We, meaning government, industry, and research, can be a model for the rest of the nation and how this can work. And hopefully we can give those who are not so radical on the one side a comfort level that, yeah, this is working. And it provides us a path forward, provides us with reliable, cheap energy to drive the economic engine to provide for public health. So with that, I appreciate your time. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much. But if, come December 1st, if you call the Department of Health and we're not there, you just have to ask for the Department of Environmental Quality, and we'll be there to help you out. So thank you very much for your time.
Prize for you here.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it
Thank you
very
for your
much.
time.
Thanks very much, Dave. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but Dave is one of the most accessible folks in state government that I know, so please find him and ask your questions. You know, a lot of things do irk me about this topic, and no offense to you, Dave, one of those is carbon emissions. We're not talking about carbon emissions, we're talking about carbon dioxide emissions. I'm here to tell you words matter, so please kind of emphasize that. We're going to take a break right now, be back in about 15 minutes with the Leveraging Relationships panel. I'm moderating that sucker and I'm starting it off, so it's going to be good. Please come back on time. Thanks.